Today, cataract surgery is a therapeutic as well as a refractive procedure with truly outstanding outcomes. Though there are a number of reasons for this healthy scenario, a meticulous state-of-the-art preoperative workup plays a key role. This presentation will focus on a few relevant and cherry-picked aspects of the preoperative diagnostics which have given me consistently good outcomes. In the interest of time, I may not elaborate upon how to actually perform these tests. I will also not be touching upon the routine battery of preoperative tests, and I suggest you look this up in any standard textbook of ophthalmology. Though I will be confining myself to preoperative ophthalmic workup, systemic evaluation is very important for the overall safety and well-being of the patient, and hence this aspect should never be ignored. Before embarking on biometric evaluation, it is important to look for evidences of concomitant ocular surface disease and blepharitis. We have known over the last several years the significant role played by an optimized ocular surface for precision in the biometric parameters. An irregular surface may be associated with erroneous keratometry reading, which in turn is likely to impact IL power calculation. Likewise, inaccurate topography and keratometry may lead on to imprecise location of the steep axis and may mar the toric IL calculations. Hence, it is important to stabilize the ocular surface before biometric evaluation. Biometry is usually repeated till consistency and repeatability of the morphometric parameters is confirmed. By the same logic, biometric evaluation ought not to be done after any contact procedure like applanation tonometry or gonioscopy, or for that matter even a dilated evaluation. Pristine Virgian cornea gives the most precise results. Hence, I would prefer to call the patient back on another day for the biometric evaluation. Should we be using lubricating eye drops before keratometry? Well, lubricating eye drops influence the K readings significantly, especially in ocular surface disease patients, and this effect is greater with higher viscosity drops. So, as per the guidelines in a recent publication in the American Journal, one should wait for an interval of at least 5 minutes before performing the keratometry. Keratometry can be performed with any of these devices. I use the auto keratometer feature of an optical biometer. For toric IOLs, I recruit multiple keratometry devices, which also includes a topographer, which helps me determine the nature of astigmatism and also astigmatic axis in borderline situations. When confronted with disparate readings, it may be worthwhile repeating the keratometry after optimizing the ocular surface. Optical biometry is the gold standard for obtaining the axial length. Alternatively, an immersion A-scan can also be used, which delivers very precise outcomes. Contact A-scan is no longer recommended for axiometry. Swept source based next generation optical biometers have additional features including total keratometry and updated formulas, in addition to a few more, adding a different dimension to biometry. Can devices of the same class be used interchangeably? Well, this study has displayed high levels of repeatability and agreement while comparing the Aladdin and the Lenstar. Hence, it is believed that the devices may be used interchangeably in normal eyes. While it is always desirable to upgrade to the newer available technology, it is heartening to note that a previous generation non-swept source OCT based optical biometer has compared quite favorably with the swept source OCT based ones, displaying an excellent agreement between these two devices. Though IOLMaster 700 was more effective in obtaining biometric measurements in eyes with dense posterior subcapsular cataract and dense nuclear cataracts. It is still possible to mess up the biometric precision and accuracy even if one is using optical biometry if the obtained values are not properly validated. The measured values should be validated against the validation guidelines provided by the manufacturer or evolved by the practice, and erroneous or suspicious values should be deleted and repeated. Expert surgeons also must be experts in the area of preoperative measurements. Many of us may be familiar with this slide depicting a mix of formulas, both old and new, that have been used over the last couple of decades. Prediction accuracy of most of these are dependent on relative ocular morphology and all perform very well within the normal ranges of differential measurements. Few formulas are known to not do well at the extremes of the axial length. These are my go-to formulas, Barrett Universal 2 and Hill RBF, though I always have a look at the other older formulas in borderline situations. It is interesting to be aware of the newer formulas in the horizon, which have been very promising in the preliminary publications. We are all aware that macular status should be meticulously evaluated before undertaking cataract surgery, not only for presbyopia correcting lenses, but also for standard monofocal lenses. Dilated fundus biomicroscopy has been the standard of care since time immemorial, but we should know that this alone may not be enough in many situations. This test is known to have low sensitivity in the presence of advanced lens changes. There is also a likelihood of missing macular lesions or at times under-assessing the severity of the lesions. I learnt it the hard way quite some time back, and let me share my experience. Quite some time back, we had a 70-year-old female patient, mother of a doctor cum IS officer, present to us for evaluation of her cataract. She was found to have a 3+ nucleosclerotic cataract with posterior subcapsular changes. Macula appeared to be normal, even the OCT was normal. However, she did not have the surgery done immediately, returned after a couple of years. By that time, her vision had dropped to hand movement, and we felt that the vision loss was disproportionate to the amount of cataract. So we advised her to undergo a preoperative OCT, which she did not want to get done, and she already had an OCT done elsewhere. Gave us the OCT printout, which appeared to be normal. This was an old OCT printout. Postoperatively, she regained a vision of only 6/18, and this was quite embarrassing for us. So when we saw the fundus, patient had a macular hole, and this is what we saw in the OCT. So it has become one of the guidelines in our setup to perform macular assessment with a SD OCT in all cataract surgery patients in the preoperative period, particularly for patients who have a visual loss that is disproportionate to the degree of the cataract. And we always insist on a very recent or a fresh scan, and we do not accept an older scan printout. The patient subsequently underwent macular hole surgery in our center. She did extremely well as far as anatomical result is concerned, had near normal visual recovery. So the ending was happy, and we definitely were left much wiser from this entire experience. There has been a plethora of research papers on the merits of OCT-based macular evaluation. Many of these papers have held the view that macular OCT is superior to a biomicroscopic examination in detecting macular abnormalities in this population. The rates of clinically missed macular pathologies are known to vary from 4.9% to 25%. Epiretinal membrane and age-related macular degeneration being the most common pathologies. And risk factors for the abnormal OCT scan include older age and diabetes mellitus. Most of us should be wary of performing presbyopia correcting IOL implantation without a macular OCT because of the risk of a potential decrease in the postoperative quality of vision. But what about routine preoperative HD OCT for all cataract patients? In a very recent January 2021 JCRS publication, preoperative HD OCT scans picked up clinically significant macular pathologies in 40.6% of the eyes. In almost two-thirds, that is 64.1% of those eyes, macular pathologies were either missed or underestimated by the preoperative fundus biomicroscopic examination. The rate of missed macular pathologies in this study population was 22.8%, with AMD being the most common pathology, followed by ERM. These are the case examples from the same publication. In all these four eyes, A, B, C, D, definite macular pathology had been missed by dilated fundus biomicroscopy, but picked up by the SD OCT. The role of preoperative macular OCT is beyond controversy for presbyopia correcting intraocular lens surgery. Macular HD OCT is also useful in detecting overlooked macular pathologies or to better assess the severity of a known macular abnormality in patients before cataract surgery. The preoperative OCT outcomes may help optimize the surgeon's clinical judgment and appropriate therapy if needed. It may also alter the surgeon's surgical strategy. For example, the surgeon may like to combine the cataract surgery with an anti-VEGF or steroid injection, or in certain situations, the surgeon may like to combine cataract surgery and the retinal procedure in the same sitting. This strategy will also improve the informed consent process and offer patients a more realistic expectations. Further studies are required to assess the cost benefit of incorporating this examination into our routine preoperative protocol. For very advanced cataracts, both modalities of fundus evaluation will not work. B-scan ultrasonography comes to our rescue in those situations. One word of caution: B-scan will only inform us about gross pathologies involving the posterior segment and may not reveal the subtle changes. As a cataract surgeon, it is good to have some idea about what to look for and how to interpret the common posterior segment pathologies rather than depend solely on the ultrasonologist. Point echoes are seen in the presence of vitreous hemorrhage, detection of which may change the surgical game plan. So, instead of performing a simple cataract surgery, the surgeon may change his plan and perform a combined phaco-vitrectomy. High reflectivity point echoes are also noticed in association with asteroid hyalosis. Presence of asteroid hyalosis may render biometry a bit inaccurate and is also a risk factor for posterior capsular rent. Dense asteroid hyalosis may be an indication of adding vitrectomy to the cataract procedure. How do we work up patients who complain bitterly about poor quality vision with normal or near normal Snellen vision and very faint lens changes? This is not an uncommon breed in our practice, and let me illustrate with an example. A 58-year-old diabetic and hypertensive lady with ocular surface issues presented with blurriness, actually 6/6 and N6 with minimal correction, and grade 1 nuclear sclerosis with very early peripheral cortical lens changes. The clinical features of this lady can be explained by DLS, that is dysfunctional lens syndrome, a term first coined by George Waring and published in 2013. Dysfunctional lens syndrome can be assessed with a device, ray tracing aberrometer, iTrace manufactured by a company called Tracy Technologies. In this connection, three features are studied in the dysfunctional lens display of the iTrace: the Snellen E, dysfunctional lens index, the DLI, and the total eye opacity map. We also make a note of the angle alpha and the higher order aberrations. The Snellen E in the total eye panel of the DLS display looks quite blurred in the left eye. The DLI is 7.12 in a scale from 0 to 10, and the total eye opacity map shows grade 1 in a scale from 0 to 5. Based on the patient's visual complaints and supported by the DLS workup data, we performed phaco-IOL in the left eye, and the results, as you see, are very gratifying. This vindicates the role of DLS assessment in the overall decision-making process. Optical alignment and its measurement assume great significance in this era of presbyopia correcting intraocular lenses. It is held that angle alpha is important in this context. Angle alpha is the distance between the red cross hairs, which indicate visual axis, and blue cross hairs, which indicates center of limbus. Since intraocular lens tends to center on the limbal center, regardless of the intraoperative centration maneuvers, and not over the visual axis, in the presence of a large angle alpha, the visual axis doesn't pass through the IOL center, and this may spell trouble in the presence of a multifocal intraocular lens. Since the visual axis passes through the diffraction rings and the vision may get compromised, resulting in potential complaints, blur, double vision, halos, etc., a better option may be a monofocal IOL with a large sweet spot. A presbyopia correcting IOL with a radius of the central button greater than angle alpha value, if available, may be more desirable. I must hasten to add that there is another school of thought that makes little of the concept of angle alpha and its influence in multifocal IOL technology, IOL selection, and or postoperative patient dissatisfaction. Let me illustrate this point with an interesting patient. A 58-year-old female patient, gynecologist, presented to me with visual discomfort, though her vision was improving to 6.6 and N6 with small correction. And she was found to have anterior and posterior subcapsular lens changes. So when I put her on the iTrace machine and used the dysfunctional lens patient display, we noticed that both eyes, the Snellen E was pretty much blurred. The dysfunctional lens index was 2.48 in the right eye and 2.70 in the left eye. That is quite significantly affected. And the total eye opacity map in the right eye had grade 2.0 and left eye also had the same amount of opacity grade. So definitely she is likely to benefit from cataract surgery. She was desirous of multifocal intraocular lens, so I calculated the angle alpha, and it was there's a red flag in the right eye and left eye is okay. But since multifocal IOL technology is always used bilaterally, and I had a relative contraindication for her multifocal IOL for the right eye, I decided not to use a presbyopia correcting intraocular lens, went ahead with a monofocal intraocular lens, performed phacoemulsification, and she has been a very happy patient. Risk stratification is another important exercise that our team engages in while scheduling a cataract patient for surgery. This strategy offers multiple benefits. It renders the preoperative patient counseling more meaningful and objective. It alerts the OT to gear up for unusual intraoperative events, allows the surgeon to self-evaluate against a standard benchmark, and initiate corrective measures if called for, and it also suggests appropriate case allotment depending on surgical expertise and seniority, especially in a teaching hospital. There have been a number of risk stratification models described in the scientific literature. A few of these are mentioned in this slide, and in one of these I had been a participant as a surgeon. One of the widely followed risk models is that of Muhtaseb, which was published in BJO in 2004. I have been following an individually customized version of this model. Points are allotted to each risk factor depending upon the weightage for each risk factor in the peer-reviewed literature. As you see here, there are three categories of allotment of points or score per risk factor, and each risk factor in category B earns 1 point, whereas in category C, each risk factor earns 3 points. Based upon the cumulative score, a surgical patient is grouped into one of 4 groups, with group 1 having no risk and group 4 high risk. As you can see here, the complication rate increases from 4.32% in group 1 to peak at 32% in group 4, which is the high risk group, with overall complication rate being 7.1%. The serious complication rate, for example, posterior capsular rent, vitreous loss, zonular dialysis, incomplete rhexis, etc., seems to increase through the groups as the risk status increases. The Muhtaseb model has been validated in many subsequent studies, and more advanced models have also been proposed. So, friends, in conclusion, satisfactory outcome in modern cataract surgery depends upon proper care of the systemic issues, a very thorough, meticulous and exhaustive preoperative workup and tests, and attention to the state-of-the-art diagnostics, a few of which I have discussed in my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.